Hello there, Drew Hanish of Whiskey Lore, and it is time for another one of my tasting videos. And today I am going to do a very unique country to country peated whiskey comparison. We're taking a Islay whiskey and we are taking an Oregon whiskey, and we are going to put them side by side, which to many people who enjoy Islay whiskeys would likely say that's sacrilege, don't be doing that. But I think this is really a good opportunity for me to introduce to you one of my favorite American single malts, and it was also a really good opportunity for me to try to find a Islay or peated whiskey from Scotland that I could give you a comparison and help you understand where this particular American whiskey falls within the peated whiskey range. So the whiskeys that I'm going to be tasting today are Caol Ila 12-year and McCarthy's Oregon Single Malt. All right, and I will show you a little bit of each bottle. Caol Ila, that is one of the most mispronounced Scotch whiskeys. Caol Ila actually means sound of Islay. And if you ever go to Islay, it's near Port Askeig, and from Kennaicraig, when you take the ferry in, you either can go to Port Ellen or you can go to Port Askeig. Port Askeig goes through this little sound in between Jura on one side and Islay on the other side, and then it's about a mile drive up this little skinny road to get to Caol Ila. The problem with traveling to Caol Ila right now is that it's back in April of 2019. I had actually gotten there just before they shut it down. They shut it down to visitors because they were doing a redesign, revamp of the visitors center to bring it more in line with what they're doing with the Johnnie Walker brand, since so much of Caol Ila ends up in Johnnie Walker. And so they're building this whole new visitor experience there, and Diageo is the one that owns it. And my fingers are crossed that they don't mess with things too much, because when you're on Islay, you really want to experience what those old distilleries really are like. But what they've done with Lagavulin is, I think, showing that they do have a lot of respect for the history of those distilleries, and so likely they won't be changing a lot of that. One of the things about Caol Ila is that you are right on the docks there, and so you would sort of think you can get a lot of sea influence out of this whiskey, and you would probably think that you're also going to get a lot of that medicinal. You're right there on the water. But Caol Ila is actually one of the milder peated whiskeys that comes off of Islay, and so it's very unique. If you've had the Lagavulins, you've had the Ardbegs and the Lefroigs, and even the Kilchomans and Bruichladdich, this one may surprise you just a little bit as to how muted it is, but not muted in a bad way. And as I do this tasting, we'll kind of give you an idea of what the difference is in Caol Ila versus the others. I've been wanting to buy this for a long time. It's been on my list, and every time I go in the store, I'm like, man, there's always something else that I end up buying. But yesterday I said, okay, I'm doing it. So the first thing that you get off of this, you kind of anticipate that you're going to be nosing peat and smoke. But the first thing that really stands out to me on this is this mint, this fresh mint, like you've just rubbed mint between your fingers and put it to your nose. There is a smokiness there. There's a earthiness as well, kind of a grassy earthiness to it. The peat smoke in this is not a medicinal peat smoke. There's a little bit of iodine in there, but what I get out of it more than anything is like a smoked ham. It smells like a smoked ham. Maybe a little bacon in there. It's definitely got that kind of a direction to it. And then there's this nice little citrusy fruit thing that goes on over the top of it. What kills me about this whiskey is that a lot of people will pass it by on the shelf. They'll hear that it's 95% used for Johnnie Walker blends, and you go, okay, well, it must not be that great a whiskey. This is a highly complex, really nice and different kind of Islay whiskey. And after you nose this, you'll say, why do they waste this in Johnnie Walker? It doesn't make any sense because there's so much going on here. All right. As soon as you taste it, while that smoke is there, again, sort of meaty, there is a cola. It's the first whiskey that I've had where cola is really pronounced when you first drink it. And it's really nice. And then it has kind of this lemony thing going on. You get kind of it's got a nice mouthfeel to it. It reminds you of caramel, but it's not sweet. It's almost got, to me, I don't know if I would call it a wine characteristic, but I mean, it could drink like a wine. It's just a really, really nice, clean, and that fresh mint lingers on the palate with a lemon that's in there. It's like a lemon meringue almost. Slight bit of pepperiness to it on the finish. Yeah, I was looking at my notes too to see if there was anything else, but soft, not medicinal. Yeah, I mean, those, you can tell a little bit of the oak in there, but that's not really a standout. There's a really interesting little almost banana that's staying on my palate as well. That is really, really interesting. I am really happy that I bought this Caol Ila 12, and I have a feeling now it will become a regular in my cabinet, because when you're gonna get somebody who wants to try an Islay whiskey and you want to maybe ease them into it, that's a really good one to get them started on, because it isn't heavily smoked and there are maybe some slight sea characteristics to it, but they don't stand out quite as much as they do in the whiskeys that come from the southern end of Islay. And that makes sense because those distilleries really get the weather coming in on them, whereas this is kind of nestled in between two islands. So this is the McCarthy's Oregon Single Malt. Now, I just went out to Los Angeles and I went hunting for this. The first time I had it was when I was in Gardnerville, Nevada, while I was going to Lake Tahoe and then down to Carson Valley. And I went to Battleborn Wine and had a chance there to have a sample of this. And I tasted it against Peat Monster, and I forget what the other whiskey was that I tasted that same day. And I was really, really impressed with this. So the story with this whiskey is that it's one of America's first single malts. Steve McCarthy, the guy who originally came up with it in the 1990s, because he took a trip to Ireland, and one day, as we all would do, he decided to go taste a bunch of different whiskeys, and he found a real love for peated Scotch whiskey, which surprises me a little bit, because when I went to Ireland, you really have to hunt or ask somebody for anything Scotch, because in Ireland they are fiercely loyal to their Irish whiskeys on those shelves. But I have seen some Scotch whiskeys, but usually you tend to see, maybe some Jim Beam and Jack Daniels there, and then it's all Irish whiskey from there on out. So he got interested in trying these different whiskeys. He tried that one in particular. His family business was an orchard, and but he was looking apparently for something else to bring revenue in, and decided to start distilling. He ordered. He actually went through. It's the Widmark brothers, and they're actually mentioned here on the back of this. The brewing company asked them to get him some Scottish peat, and or not Scottish peat, but malt that had been smoked and processed with peat. And so I don't know where he gets his peat from, but when I smell this, it's not something that probably came from Port Ellen. In Islay, it likely came from Inverness, which is it's in a little elbow there where there is a water nearby. There's a strip of land there, an area there called the Black Isles, and there's a lot of grain that's grown there, and so it probably picks up some sea character, but probably the peat that they're using there is not going to be a medicinal kind of peat. And this, I don't really get the medicinal qualities out of this, but it also doesn't come across as a very heathery kind of peat like you would get in Speyside in a Benriach or something like that. So really interesting whiskey. This is aged 3 years in Oregon oak. It is, the proofs on these are almost exactly the same. This one is 43, I believe. It's 42 and a half, and this is 43. So they're very close. This is very, very light. This one on the nose has a lot of grain. I smell that grain more than I smell smoke. There's a little bit of oak in there. I sort of get a graham cracker smell out of this. There's a little hint of that campfire in the background, and you get kind of it's just got like almost like not a sweet. When I say this, you're going to think sweet, but it's got kind of a toasted marshmallow, but it's more the char that you get from a toasted marshmallow on this one. That grain does stand out. It really does. And maybe there's a bit of lemoniness in this one as well. So it doesn't necessarily on the nose have the same things going on as Caol Ila, but it's also got that sort of muted character that, it's not an aggressive smoke. It's milky. There's a little bit of pepper in there. You feel like you're getting sort of almost a soapy lemon. When I say soapy, there's an interesting, again, that little bit of lemon comes in there, almost that lemon meringue kind of thing going on, but really gentle grains, and the smoke really starts to develop as you swallow the whiskey, and then that nice smoke. A little fresh mint comes in on that one, like a lemongrass kind of thing going on. There's a slight bit of oaky tannin in there, but it is far from offensive. It really actually adds an interesting layer to this whiskey. Again, very nice mouthfeel on this one. It really is a well thought out, well distilled. As I'm hearing, if this is true or not, they only distill this one time, and that probably leads a lot to that nice milky kind of character. You're getting a lot of the oils in there, and a lot of that flavor is there. It's not as complex as Caol Ila is, but it really has a lot of stuff going on with it. Now, Steve McCarthy passed the whiskey over to Hood River, and Hood River now is doing this, and I don't know what will change about it, if anything changes about it. From what I understand, they are following what Steve McCarthy's original vision for this was. So interesting that it's actually going to be distilled and aged in the higher terrains of Oregon or along the Hood River, rather than being out there in the in Scotland and that kind of terrain. So really, really interesting, I think. And then, yeah, now I'm getting a little bit more of the smoke after I come back to it after drinking it. If you are an Islay fan, I think you would find this to be a very interesting whiskey and fun because it's an American whiskey. Now, I had a really hard time finding it. Thank you to McCarthy's for getting me a bottle of this, and apparently it is available in South Carolina, not for me to purchase in the store, but Caskers, I think, was the site that I found that I might be able to get. So that you're probably gonna have to order a bottle, because I don't know how far this spreads beyond the West Coast, but I was in California and I was in Las Vegas, and I looked in Utah and I couldn't find it in any of those places, and then I kind of gave up after that trying to find it. But very interesting. Highly recommend both of these whiskeys. I am very happy that I have both of these in my collection. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any thoughts, if you've tried these and you have comments that you want to leave, go ahead and do so on the video. And until next time, cheers and slainte.